before we start the session, I would want to have a show of hands. How many of you are aware of this cyber attack that I spoke about, the cyber attack on X? I'm looking forward to an excellent response. This is the cyber community, the community of cyber security leaders. Can we once again have a show of hands? Wow, that's very, very encouraging. And we will talk about it. We will try and keep this discussion very lively, engaging. And you, the audience, will have a very crucial part to play in this. The part is that, somewhere down the line, the table will turn and you will be able to ask questions. I really want to give away a lot of my own responsibility and accountability, and you will get a chance to ask your question. It can be related to anything. It can be related to the X cyber attack, DDoS attacks, whatever comes to your mind stemming from this discussion. And I am looking forward to some really excellent questions, because this is the august community of very, very senior cybersecurity leaders. So with these words, we would start, and I would start with none other than... Absolutely. He is my favorite person today, has always been a friend that I have known for a very long time. So Hilal bhai, during my address, I spoke about the growing prominence of cybercrime and how the threat landscape has really, really evolved over the past few years in terms of sophistication, attack surface, and the general complexity of the incidents which are happening and the frequency with which they are happening. We would love to start the discussions with you.
Well, I'm glad to be here.
I can see that.
Yeah, so Muqbil, first of all, it's a great honor to be in your presence. I think.
Always.
Yeah, so talking about basically attack surface area and attack vectors, right? So, I mean, we keep on talking about it. I mean, there's not a single roundtable or there's not a single conference that happens where we do not actually talk about the complexity of attack vectors, right? So in terms of basically what we are facing now and what we are going to face in future, right? So there's going to be a drastic, basically evolution of the attack vectors, right? So we started with basic identity theft, simple frauds and things like that. And in today's context, like you mentioned, X being such a big organization and it getting pulled down by a DDoS attack, that's 101 of security operations, that you should not get basically pulled down by DDoS attack. It's such a a school by mistake that, okay, we did not have enough preparation in place to basically withstand attack like that. Now, coming to basically the attacks or the attack surface area that we have in today's context with respect to applications or network systems, identities, and things like that, right? So we start with basically the basic fundamentals. Okay, we need basically to figure out, okay, we are going to be attacks are something as basic as social engineering, for example, which has phishing, which has wishing, which has WhatsApp spams and things like that. And then, of course, we have third party that you also talked about. Is going to be something that's going to be there today. It was there yesterday, is there today, is going to be there tomorrow as well. So then, of course, we have attacks vectors that are going to be specific to certain crown jewels of the company, right? So for example, availability, in the X case, right, was a crown jewel. So similarly, data is a crown jewel, right? So we have basically identities, which is a crown jewel. So these attacks are going to be happening. Identity theft, credential stuffing, password-based attacks, and things like that are going to happen all the time. Now, have they actually evolved in their operational basically efficiency? Of course they have, right? So earlier we used to have simple password-based attacks. Now we have multi-factor authentication that gets bypassed. Now, just think about it, right? So we started with the basic multi-factor authentication, okay, something that you have, something that you know, something that you are. And that actually is for example, we had OTPs and things like that, and that used to be sufficient. Now that's no longer sufficient. We say, oh, no, it doesn't happen, right? So we moved on to basically hardware-based, multi-factor authentication. And last year, actually, it was said that, okay, it's not enough protection against identity theft. Now we need passwordless authentication. We need basically something multi-signature-based authentication and things like that. So it's evolving. So you can imagine what kind of attacks are happening. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, anything on the business side, right? So which are or slightly futuristic, but really not. Think about basically Web3 attacks. You have basically like you have blockchain attacks, like crypto attacks. WazirX is a very, very big example. Then before that, we recently had a basically by $1.3 billion scam. It just evaporated. You cannot even figure it out where it went. So you can imagine the complexity. And believe me, like it's such a strange attack that happened, right? So that wallets that were actually used, basically for, that was compromised, needed actually signatures from 7 different persons to basically authorize a transaction. Just imagine 7 different people. And even that actually was not sufficient. And people found out a loophole in the crypto blockchain and said, okay, yeah, this can happen. So Lazarus Group actually took responsibility for that grade, right? So now, then of course, like we have a defects, going to be like troublesome. Then on top of that, we have basically something like AI. Of course, nothing is going to be complete without basically mentioning of AI. So AI actually has also basically been focused of like attack vectors like hallucination, bias, and things like that, which is going to be basically considerable going forward. So I think all in all, attacks are going to be much more novel in their approach. And I think the defenses are always playing a catch-up game. Hopefully, we'll catch up to that.
I love the optimism in your voice, and I hope it comes true. Hilal, you have spoken about a lot of very important aspects of cybercrime. For example, you have spoken about social engineering attacks, third-party attacks, deepfake, AI, and all of that. Very, very interesting, inputs from you. Now, I would want to go to you, Nagesh. Hilal has already spoken about how the threat surface area has expanded. What are the new threat vectors that you currently see? And maybe you could also talk about something like quantum that a lot of people in the world are talking about. So as Hilal spoke about that even those 7 gates which were built in order to protect it could not save it. What would happen when quantum is here?
Like to take some of the words, start from what Bilal has said. First and foremost is that phishing and phishing attacks are one of the biggest threat vector. Phishing and you can the misinformation, disinformation, deepfakes in the era of AI where we are moving ahead. So that is the biggest threat vector I consider. Then next is misconfiguration of the systems. That is the other area and misconfiguration. Then as you have said that quantum related risk where existing encryptions and methodologies will not be as strong as it is today. So that will also cause a threat to the existing infrastructure which we are using right now. So that is the third one. Other important aspects which we consider is that non-fixing of the vulnerabilities in a timely manner and increasing attack surface area. So these are the things which if we consider, then we'll be able to address our
Great inputs from you.
risk.
Great inputs from you, Nagesh. Could you enumerate some of the challenges that, very, very briefly, some of the challenges that confront cybersecurity leaders today?
We said that the phishing in the era of AI, where the deep fakes and all those things are very prevalent, informations which are coming, that information is getting modified in such a way that you don't know that this information is correct or that information is correct. So the things where most of the informations are getting generated through AI tools. And if any misinformation, disinformation is coming through that tool, that could be the biggest cyber threat and threat vector that we consider.
Right. Excellent inputs from you, Nagesh. Now, going back to Hilal. Hilal, we spoke about, he has already spoken about some of the challenges. Do you see the skill gap as a major challenge? And do you see the advent of quantum computing also as a major challenge? Any thoughts on that?
Absolutely, right? So I think we, as basically like people who work in security operations in particular, right? So we suffer what I call is basically level 3 gap, right? What happens is that like every time we actually have a security incident, we go to a certain level and they say, okay, yeah, this incident was caused by this and the root cause is like this. and we should actually figure that out. So what people do not actually, I mean, at least in my experience, what I've observed is that we don't go the distance, right? So for example, if I had an attack today, I want to understand, okay, the root cause is like this. How do I make sure that it does not happen like in future as well? What are the necessary things I need to do? So that's where actually the skill gap actually manifests itself. What happens is that I do not necessarily have the skills or the knowledge that's necessary for me to build those kind of controls. And that's kind of like repeatedly basically coming again and again. Imagine it like this. Let's take the X example, right? Again, so DDoS. Everybody knows that, okay, what are the different ways we can actually protect ourselves from DDoS? It can be, okay, I will dynamically scale my resources. That's one of the defenses that I can do. The other thing is that, okay, not be susceptible to basically DDoS in first place. How do I make sure that I have proactive intelligence in place to ensure that, okay, there are bad actors who are going to be attacking me? What are the different things I can do to prevent that? Do I have that kind of proactive intelligence at all? Now, think about the third defense, for example. The third defense is, okay, do I know my application well enough to know that it's going to be vulnerable for this kind of attack? Do I need to put controls in place like thresholds, or I can potentially like put the chokeholds or something like that to basically slow down the attack or something big? So there are a lot of different things. I'm sure that X team also had always basically kept those in mind, but somehow it did not actually come to that, which means that there was a lack of ensuring that, okay, there was practice, the attacks were practiced, the defenses against those attacks were practiced, and they did not do that. So skill gap is going to be like that. It does not necessarily always to be technical. It needs to be process-oriented as well to make sure that we have an airtight, basically like a security control in place that cannot be bypassed. Now, what else basically is actually challenged in the security operations, right? So if you think about it, right? So how many people here actually know forensics, right? A handful of people actually like will know exactly how to do that. How many people actually can do debugging on an exploit? How many people can do actually debugging on an application attack? It's going to be very significantly difficult to find those kind of people. That's the reason for that is because we get satisfied with the base level of preparation that we do, and we get basically comfort in that, and we carry on like that. So it's not something that gives me comfort, actually, to be honest, right? So it's something that alarms me that we are not going the distance. And yeah, so I think, what are the other part of the question? Sorry.
The other part was about, do you see quantum as a major threat?
Oh, yeah. Quantum cryptography is already here. I mean, it's already here. China actually announced that they have built a better supercomputer than Willow. So Willow was the latest one that Google developed. Now we have a better one developed by China. So which means that there are already basically like tools in place which can actually break quantum algorithms. So now it's not like, okay, I'm going to prepare now, and 5 years down the line, I will have good enough defenses against quantum-based attacks. Actually, we should have been doing that 5 years before, right? We are thinking about it now. So it's a challenge like that we always knew was coming, but we were very casual about it. So now every protocol, like say, for example, RSA 2048 or RSA 4064, all of them are going to be basically vulnerable to basically like quantum attacks. Now, nothing is sacred, right? So all the security control, the backbone of security is actually compromised. So obviously, like this is an alarming situation. I would rather actually alarm people. I'm glad to be the alarmist right now to ensure that, okay, people understand the gravity of the situation. It's going to be really, really significant. And people need to basically like pick up their, pick up today and ensure that, okay, yeah, they are at least preparing towards defending their organization against these kind of attacks.
We are both in the same boat. Both are alarmists.
yeah, exactly.
Very, excellent points. When you said that people should have started thinking about quantum about 5 years back, and they took everything very, very casually, that is actually very, very true. And you also spoke about how there are huge skill gaps with respect to areas such as forensics or debugging of a lot of these applications. Sriram, you have been nodding for quite a while, and after I have had a response from Sriram, I'll go to you. I hope you have an excellent question ready for them. Sriram.
Question
is, we have spoken about a lot of challenges, skill gap, quantum. Your views on this, on maybe some of the newer challenges, threat vectors, all of that.
Sure. I think the skill gap definitely.
Or do you think that there is a lack of resources, lack of sophistication in defense tools? I mean, It is like the attack surface. It's a huge domain.
It's catch me if you can, right? So in the context of the criminal, so you're always going to be chasing that tail.
You're always in a chasing position. True, true,
Yeah.
true.
So today, the unfortunate fact is that criminals have more resources at their disposal than normal corporates have, and therefore the chase game continues. And there is skill gap that Hilal spoke about. But then there are partner ecosystems you could leverage. You don't need to have the expertise in-house all the time. Debatable, but at least there is an avenue available for you to leverage. That's one. B, you will always have situations where if you don't keep track of what's coming, what's growing in the technology landscape, or even the business processes landscape like clouds migration and so on, you'll end up not anticipating those risks and protecting it, which gets to the point that, okay, today quantum, but what next tomorrow? So post-quantum cryptography, as an example, is available today, but how many companies are experimenting with that? Everybody's talking about it, but where's the real proof in the pudding? I don't know of it at least. So that's the other piece. So my take is these require, I think, about 2 or 3 dimensions to be looked at. One, what's your current ecosystem, the lay of the land is saying in the first place? You often don't even know that. What visibility do you have, and gain intelligence to the point of X we made earlier, that maybe the DDoS wasn't set up for every environment and it should have been. And the second point being, okay, once you know that, what do you really need to look at from a SOC and a modern SOC in that context? And then what kind of tools and technologies that you can layer on top of it to get the right insight on time? Get to know of the incident 5 months, 5 weeks later, your game's over.
True, true. I absolutely agree with you. And excellent points coming from you. You spoke about cloud migration and a host of other challenges that confront senior cybersecurity professionals and the whole domain in itself. So now, as I promised, the time has come. Do we have any questions in the house? Yes. Wonderful. Please, can we have the mic sent there? Yeah.
Hi, can you hear me? So my name is Mayank and I'm working as a DPO in CRISIL. So my question is that, and it's a very, very generic issue. So we are talking about, like we talked about a lot of things, but a general issue is on the alert fatigue as well, right? On the SOC. So how do you guys like recommend, or what do you recommend on managing the false alerts and the alert fatigue that all the companies today have, right? So how do you efficiently manage it to have some sort of a balanced approach towards it? So that's my question.
Great question. And whoever wants to take it, it's an open house. Whoever, anyone, whoever.
So that's a.
ऐसा लग रहा है लखनऊ में है. पहले आप.
So that's a bit of a loaded question actually, right? So if you think about it, so there is no like a single size fits all kind of situation. It depends on the industry, on what kind of SOC that they need, right? So, but there are always going to be fundamentals, right? So that we cannot ignore, right? So for example, a SOC needs a good analytical solution for aggregating incidents and events. They need good parsing tools, for example. They need good notification and reporting, basically like features in basically their tooling. They need automation, right? So automation to basically fix if something can be fixed, basically like through the tooling. On top of that, right? So there is always going to be like necessary augmentation of threat intelligence or things like which external expertise is going to be required, right? And one of the important things is to understand, okay, you cannot necessarily basically like address all the events that are going to be coming into your organization given their severity, given their importance, and given their impact, right? So the classification of your incident response is going to be very, very important. So ideally, like if I was starting basically in a SOC from scratch, I would identify, okay, what is my something as basic as mean time to respond, or mean time to basically like fix something, or mean time to basically recover, or something like that. Whatever the metrics that I'm going to say, I want to basically identify that and start from there, right? So you cannot basically what that will do is basically that will allow you to kind of like allocate resources that are going to be necessary for you to reduce those metrics, right? So you start from there. So on top of that, like so, then I want to identify, okay. Yeah, I have the tooling in place, which is going to be basic tooling. That's going to be always going to be in place. Now, what else do you need? You need a good processes around that, right? For example, do you have an escalation matrix? Do we have what kind of incidents need for the investigation, right? So who needs to be notified of an incident in case we have an basically significant incident, for example? And how do we actually deal with regulatory basically issues that are as a result of that particular
Compliances
attack? Because we do need to basically do that. So all of these communications, tooling, basically metrics, those are going to be your building blocks for the SOC. How do you efficiently manage it? Is basically identifying whatever is going to be improvement over a period of time when you want to basically challenge a SOC.
Great. You want to add something, Sriram?
Very quick one. I think there are two sides of the story. One is you're searching for needle in the haystack. The second side of the story is that you don't necessarily need to check all the haystacks or all the needles. Point being that if you have logs that are so galore that you really can't keep track, yes, fatigue will set in, but then you probably also need to know the crown jewels that you really care about and focus there.
Thank you.
Here,
I think
here I'd like to add a few more
wonderful
things which you need to
panel
consider when
discussion.
analyzing the SOC.
This is how a panel discussion should be, where everyone is jumping in.
There
Yes.
are two important points you need to consider when you are reduce the false alerts in any of the systems. First is that what is the any attack, what is the exploitation capability of that attack, and what could be the severity to the critical information and critical assets of your organization. If those things, if you consider based on that, you can prioritize the things, and you can take the highest priority of the things at the highest level. So that way, which is having the lowest priority, that can be taken out, and the rest of the things you can consider. So exploitation capability and the severity, those things need to be considered as part of any of the risk analysis we consider, that need to be considered in case of SOC alerts as well.
Excellent inputs from you, Nagesh. My good friend Srikanth has been waiting since a very long time. And I must thank you for this question, because this is one of the questions that I had also prepared. So he has anyway asked it, so I am one question less. Srikanth, your views on it. What would be the basic building blocks of a modern SOC, particularly in this age of AI, predictive analytics, and all of that?
Thank you. Good evening, all. Vanakkam. First of all, the SOC is, the mission is prevent, detect mission. In that detect and respond, respond is the main area for SOC. How you are configuring, because currently you see there are a lot of connected devices are coming. There are a lot of devices it's growing. It's not, recently there are a lot of connected IoT kind of things and all is going on high priority in the manufacturing sector. And if you're not in manufacturing, it is in hospital or anywhere financial, is going to the connected device. Most of the threats kind of things majorly in that area right now, kind of ransomware attack or any kind of malware. So how you are, the industry is finding that, how you are going to detect and respond to that? Are we capable, that kind of skill set we have in the industry to quickly analyze and take the call immediately? But that is still the challenge is, it is there in the industry, because if you see analysts, they limitedly they will look at that area, but there is a malware, EDR is there, XDR is there, all there. But are the threat hunter is ready to look at that and they take that call? That is one of the challenges there. And right now, take supply chain. Supply chain is a major area where all the companies have. When I go to a supply chain asking about your SOC report, they are giving the support. When I go on assessment that a supplier, they don't have a SOC first of all. Then why are you giving the SOC to report? I'm talking about the few vendors. I'm not talking about everyone. That's what the challenge, because when you go and assess the vendor or the supplier, they don't have kind of, but they are giving, they're saying we are having all the log support, everything. They're all little challenges, because we are integrating with all the connected vehicles or the devices inside the plant operation. Think of attack happen to that inside that manufacturing area. It is a risk in that case.
True.
These are all some of the challenges.
Excellent point. And we had a question from you, a very interesting question, which a lot of the panelists have answered. Now, I also have a question for you. What kind of attack happened on X? Amazing. Can I have the mic sent there? Is there a mic around? Can you please give the mic to the... Can we have a show of hands, please?
It was an advanced persistent threat group, very well organized attack. And whenever there is an organized attack, be it any kind of defense you have, any of the tools, EDR, whatever, it is 100% certain that you will get compromised. This is what has happened with Twitter. The attack, in fact, was planned for 6 months continuously. This is what's coming out of the media.
Great insights from you. Another question which comes to my mind, what does DDoS attack stand for? What does DDoS stand for?
Distributed denial.
Distributed denial of service. So when this attack happened, the owner, Mr. Elon Musk, one of the most famous entrepreneurs of the world, he laid the blame on, territorial players and state actors like Ukraine and all of that. Do you think it is possible to trace something like a DDoS attack? Can we have a show of hands? Any responses that can we have the mic here?
Distributed DOS, basically, you cannot point out which location it is coming from.
Correct. So it's a distributed, by its very nature, it's distributed. You cannot pinpoint the place of origin. However, a lot of talk has been going on. So in that respect, my question to Srikanth is, when you talk about the modern day capabilities of a SOC, obviously you discounted a lot of enterprises who have no SOC and they still come out with reports. We will take it in that spirit also. There are a lot of enterprises like that. But what modern tools and technologies do you think can really strengthen a modern day SOC?
No, strengthen is okay, but are you strengthening the internal insider threats? Because currently there are a lot of applications developments happening where their application, they're copying from the GitHub or anywhere, and when we have an vast assessment on that, and I found there are a lot of links traveling towards external world, and they're asking that, I don't know how it is, are these kind of testings, SOC will check on that kind of thing is not there in that currently. Because
Correct.
it is a little bit challenge over there also because
Right. So, coming back to the crux of this panel discussion, it is around the leveraging of something as critical and cutting edge as predictive analytics for a modern SOC. Have you experimented with anything like that? Is my question to you, Srikanth.
current, I can tell one or two, which is current tools, which is kind of Splunk or an kind of thing that gives a visibility on this new modern SOC. But still, deeper, if you go to that, there is also challenges there. But skill level is the main thing. You have given the good tool, but the skill level of the people is still yet to
Skill gap is a major
yeah.
thing. But you are experimenting with something like predictive analytics,
Yeah.
right? Great. So how has your experience been when you have used those tools? What tangible benefits do you see coming out of it?
We can easily, real-time scenarios, we can see that, use cases and all, we can see that. And AI, currently the AI kind of thing, but still a lot of improvements required. But definitely the visibility of there is there.
I was coming to AI. It is the flavor of the season. No discussion on technology, cybersecurity, or anything in the world. Now I say anything in the world can escape the mention of something as critical or as buzzing as artificial intelligence or Gen AI these days. Going to you, Sriram, have you experimented with some of these latest tools for your SOC operations or wherever in the entire cybersecurity, posture?
Yeah, so I think it's a journey. It's not over yet. But put to the point Srikanth was talking about, as you bring in the user behavior to normal versus abnormal, how do you, many a times we use the world's most favorite tool, if I can say that, Microsoft Excel, which is obviously not the most optimal, but then there are Splunks and there are other such tools that provide much better insights. So those are...
Right. So have you experimented with any of them, and what has your experience been? Any tangible benefits that you have seen?
Yeah, so I think the crux is what you want to find, right? It's not about you can write all kinds of rules, but if you don't know what your abnormal looks like, and even the normalcy pace of abnormal, for example, APT, the gentleman here mentioned that it'll look like a normal day activity, but then if you find the abnormality such as it came from a very unusual activity for that user, if you don't correlate those two with the network logs and what have you, then you will still miss the needle in the haystack.
True,
So the point being, you have to be very clear and deliberate about what you're really searching for. Kind of goes back and links to the other world.
That is your favorite phrase.
Needle in the haystack is my favorite of the day. Yes.
I knew you are going to come back to that. So, Hilal, I really want to understand this. So we are having this discussion around SOC, predictive analytics and all of that. Since the operative word, one of the operative words is predictive, how do you really measure the predictiveness of something? I mean, it's like a very hypothetical situation where you are trying to find something that hasn't happened or has been thwarted. So your opinion or thoughts would be great on that, Hilal.
So just to basically give you a bit of background, right? So we created, the first time I built an SIEM was back in 2010, 2011, right? So I was working with Novell at that time. It's a legendary company. So, and we built something called Novell Sentinel, right? And it was 14 years back, right? And at that time, we actually created predictive models, right? So what exactly, it's not something new that we are doing today, right? So it has been there forever. It's just that we called it something different at that time, right? So all the machine learning that we used at that time was basically to predict or anticipate what is going to happen next. Right, so it was not based on, there's a lot of things that we can do with correlation, right? So, but correlation is not predictive basic analytics, or it's not predictive machine learning, right? It's more about basically, okay, we want to drive some intelligence that can give us some indicators of what is going to happen next. So, for example, one of the models, and it's very common, like across all the analytics tools you can actually find, we are using some moving averages. The reason we are actually using moving averages is to understand, okay, if there is going to be an anomaly at some point, and we understand patterns in the historical data that we have, we understand the patterns, and basically we want to understand, okay, when is this going to happen next? The signals that we actually have is not going to basically tell us, okay, when is the next attack going to happen, and which basically asset is going to be impacted. What it does tell us that there's high frequency or this high probability of something happening. It does not accurately pinpoint my application is going to be attacked. What it does tell me that you need to anticipate that something is going to happen, and you would want to basically increase basically some level of sophistication in your controls. For example, let's take the X example, right? So if X had actually used predictive intelligence, they might have assumed, for example, we were talking about advanced persistent threats, right? So advanced persistent is a very valid thing. They are going to be having a lot of targeted attacks against them. So predictive intelligence can predict, okay, we are going to be susceptible to these kind of attacks. Do we need to increase our scalability, for example? Or do we need to basically use some other defensive mechanism for that? So that's through the moving averages, for example, that we plot, or the benchmarks that we set, that actually tells what is going to happen next. So the predictive intelligence is not about actually a specific element is going to be impacted or a specific asset is going to be compromised. It's more about, okay, telling you that, okay, anticipate there's something going to be happening which needs much more attention. And that's how we use these models. Talk to any of the partners, right? So let it be SentinelOne, CrowdStrike, or anybody else. Everything prediction is not about, okay, yeah, exactly, this person is going to basically cause insider attack.
Exactly possible.
Right.
So, right. My entire thought behind this question was, how do you really, kind of come to a place where you have tangible metrics to measure something? That's a great input from you, Hilal. And now, we have had an opinion across this panel where people have agreed and they have admitted to, using some of these tools. My question to you is, I am again going to come up with a question for you. How many in this house are aware of predictive analytics tools, and how many of you are actually experimenting with any of them? Can we have a show of hands? Because we are discussing predictive analytics and the modern SOC. So I want to understand how many of you have heard of it, aware of it, are aware of it, or at least experimenting with it. Let's go there. Let's give some new people some chance. A lot of hands. Yes. Right in front. Yeah.
So actually, predictive analysis is now these days very common because the kind of threat landscape which is increasing or evolving, and zero-day attack especially, you should also predict what kind of trend is there in the market, what kind of trend which is happening in your own system, how much you are prepared against those kind of basically threat landscape. I think those kind of analysis is providing us lots of insight, your preparatory work, and you are building your own defense mechanism so that those kind of attack is not going to impact you.
Right.
And these days, whatever the tool that we are talking about, it is one of the very, very important parameter at the time of considering any model.
So my question was, are you experimenting with it?
Yes.
You are. Okay, great. Can we have some more show of hands, especially from the back?
Just to add on.
Yes, please.
So,
Yes, please.
In fact, I would rather, agree to Hilal when he was saying that it's not a new thing, right? I remember we were in Thomson Reuters and we were actually doing this e-discovery tools, right? And the projects where we were using tools which were actually picking up from the coding which the people does, right? On the particular set, understanding, the machine was understanding and doing the predictive coding, right? So, and that I'm talking about 10 to 12 years back. So since that time we have been like experimenting and doing, now the word has like come and developed, the technologies have been developing, but I think machine learning and predictive analysis have been there since a while.
So a lot of feeling that I am gathering from this August gathering is that it is kind of old wine in new bottle. Is that true? Everyone is saying the same thing. We have done this 10 years back.
No, Muqbil, just imagine, right? So a fraud and abuse detection is one of the primary use cases for predictive intelligence. How we have been doing that forever. And even before we had digital basically like apparatus in place, we were doing predictive intelligence. It was not like something that has just come.
You're just saying that the nomenclature has changed. The name has changed. The person is still remains.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, actually, one thing I like to add, Muqbil, that related to informations, actually, all the informations we may not be getting from the system, from the existing, some of the alerts may or logs may not be getting generated from the system. So we should think of the information, internal as well as external information or data, based on which high quality of predictive analytics can be done. So thing is that the information should be available. If it is not being generated by the native software, some of other tools and technologies we should generate the logs or the activity logs.
Information
for all
should
the
be available.
activities.
Great. Can we have the mic there? My good friend has been waiting for a very long time for his response. Yes, quickly, we are on top of the hour. Yes.
Okay. So one thing what we can do is like integrating the threat intelligence platform to your SIEM, making him also take your EDR integration. So nowadays what we call it is extended detection and response, XDR kind of a concept, where you add an automation to it, it becomes much faster to identify the attacks. In addition to that, what we can do, we can identify the attacks like APT's attack running in the market, have a team who do real-time threat hunting and identify is there any use cases which are really attacking our environment. Like see, environment differ. Like it's like FMGC might have different kind of an attack, or if you talk about IT or telecom, they have different kind of an attack. So attack vectors right now, what we have, try to identify if your environment is capable to compromise that and identify what are your detection and response mechanism in place and mature it over a period of time.
Right. I think this panel discussion has to be classified as one of the most engaging ones. I've never seen so many questions and responses coming from the audience. Thank you all for doing that. And this also goes on to say a lot about the subject that we are currently discussing. And it's very critical importance for the domain of cybersecurity. My eyes are totally on the clock. And we still have 10 seconds to go. So we have done a great job. Mr. Gaurav Srivastav, we are finishing before time. And I would like to thank all my panelists and the wonderful audience for being such a great audience with such lovely questions. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us today.